And everyone who's already joined, we are on YouTube right now. We're just waiting for everyone else to sign on.
Carol, you got my note about the HR meeting?
Earlier this morning, I wrote back to you.
Okay, I haven't looked yet. Okay.
Yep.
And just so everyone knows who signed on recently, we're on YouTube. We got that set up so it would be ready to go.
Okay, thank you. How you doing, Ross?
I'm doing just fine. How about you?
Life's incredible.
Nice. What do y'all think about my mask? How about this?
It's the right look.
It also, besides the COVID protection, it also hides my ugly face. So.
Oh, Ross, don't fish for compliments.
Peter, is that a Gamecock's mask? I can't tell.
Of course, it's a Gamecock mask.
I like it. I like it, man. Although I don't think we're going to have a football season this fall. I'm pretty bummed about it.
We're going to have the same record as Clemson.
Now we're talking.
Yeah,
Now
O,
we're talking.
O, and O.
Perfect.
That's right.
Hey, it looks like you went to the same barber I went to, Ross.
Oh yeah.
Homeschool barber.
Oh yeah. I
I'm about to try it myself at some point.
Yeah, okay,
For
good.
for $25, get your own clippers at Targets. I mean, this works great.
I have my clippers.
How's everybody doing?
I got a little bit too close.
Who you got there, Councilmember Shade, Sergeant Jasper?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the 4th of July. Come on.
no, Carolina Day.
Carolina Day, 4th of July. Yes.
And Mr. Mayor, we have everyone on the line, except for Councilmember Waring.
Are we expecting him?
Yeah. It's 3:04 too.
Well, if he were with us, he'd be early. But we'll give him another minute and see if he signs on.
The most important person is Amy.
Yeah,
So
he's
we're
there.
just reminding everybody to wear their masks this weekend. That's the single thing, most beneficial thing folks can do right now. So, and y'all wish us luck. Matt Fountain and I, Monday morning, will be making our presentation to the State Transportation Infrastructure Bank Committee regarding our 2 projects that have been proposed. They had been originally scheduled for March, but got, delayed because of the
Really?
Yeah.
You said Monday morning, Mayor?
Monday morning,
Okay.
9 o'clock. Councilmember Waring, are you out there? So I think we'll go ahead and proceed. I'd like to call this here meeting of the Ad hoc Budget Advisory Committee order. If you'll just join me for a moment of silent prayer, please. Amen. Thank you. So I'm going to turn this right on over to Amy Wharton, who's got a presentation for us all about our 2020 budget, how we're doing so far this year, and then talk about our budget coming up for next year. I commend her and all our team for getting this information together. And as I think you'll see, our overall city staff has really been mindful of trying to keep our expenditures down. So everybody's really pitching in on this in a team fashion. With that being said, I will hand it over to you, Amy.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
So our agenda, you can see here, let's go over the 2020 budget of our monthly reports for May, and then just where we are on the financial condition, a little bit on our 2021 budget, and then any other business if anybody has anything. So I'll just jump into our monthly reports for May. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So revenues, our general fund revenues, we're really starting to see the effects of COVID-19. You can see the highlighted areas. Franchise fees, we knew that about that beforehand. That's not necessarily due to COVID, but it's still an issue that we have for the year. But really sales and user charges, fines and forfeitures, penalties and costs in our recreational facilities are really seeing losses at this point in time. And you can see it better. I know that these are very small, but they're in your packets as well. But the graph will really kind of show you where we are in terms of actual to targets. The actual is the orange and the targets are the blue lines. So licenses is ahead of schedule right now. We're about 96% in collections for business licenses as of June, at the end of June.
What percentage, Amy?
I think it's 96% that we've collected, or 92%. We're in the 90 percentile somewhere.
Yeah, well, that's pretty good.
So it looks like we'll be okay with business licenses, but we're still projecting a little bit of a loss just because we're not sure how the rest of the year will go. So moving on, enterprise funds. Obviously, these are all our special facilities, but we're basically shut down. So we're well under budget for revenues in our facilities. Our visitor numbers have steadily increased since May 28th, with Angel Oak having the highest number of visitors. And then expenditures, well, just going back to the facilities too, with the increasing cases of COVID, we're not sure how those facilities will continue to operate, if we'll see a decline in visitors or if we'll have to shut them down again. So just keep that in mind. For expenditures, we're under budget overall in all of our expenditures. We did expect to see some savings just essentially from the city being shut down for 2 months, but all of the invoices should be caught up at this time, so it shouldn't be a timing issue anymore. Business is still slower than normal in most areas, but that has a lot to do with the fact that we're not open to the public really yet. And any of those areas really don't have the biggest impact on our budgets anyway. We're still seeing some additional unbudgeted expenses for PPE, cleaning supplies, janitorial expenses, those types of things because of the coronavirus. And we had some obviously unexpected additional expenses in June that will impact our cash flow as well. And these charts kind of show you where we are in terms of expenditures. Stop me if you have questions too, okay? And then stormwater, I'm sorry.
Go back to that. So every department is showing a under budget on expenses.
Mm-hmm.
And the total, I guess you would say, savings at this point is almost $8.5 million.
Yeah.
And that's across the board. And that's why I was sharing that it seems like all our departments are trying to do their share to keep our expenditures down.
Zoom meeting. Hi.
Mr. Mayor, Amy?
Yes, Councilmember Jackson.
I was just curious, Amy, you said that June is going to see some, has seen unexpected expenses. Can you just give us an example of?
Well, we did have to order some more supplies, some PPE supplies and masks and things like that. You know, we've had to have some of our facilities deep cleaned and those types of expenses just for COVID. And then because of the civil unrest, we had some additional overtime expenses and things like that that will have a pretty big impact on us, I think.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shade.
So, Amy, that's 8.4 million through May. If you were to extrapolate that for the end of the year, what do you think that number could come out to be?
Depending on how we hold our expenses, like we've asked departments to do, we could probably stay on track with that. You know, some of that is because we were shut down though as well. And now with us being back operational, we won't see quite as much savings as we had.
But I mean, do you see this extending into the rest of the year to that number of 8.4 turning into 10 million, 12 million?
I hope so. Yeah, that's what we're asking everybody to do, is really kind of hold the line, because we need to cut expenses as much as we possibly can at this point.
So, but how are we able to project what that number is going to look like? I mean, is there a way of doing that now, or is it too many variables?
Probably a little bit too many variables, because we are working, as we get through these slides a little bit more, we're working with the departments. Our budget analysts have all gone through the budgets to see where, you know, we've seen cost savings in the past in certain departments where we think we might be able to reduce expenditures and some line items in their budgets. We still need to go and talk with them about that. And they might have some ideas too. I've talked with some of the departments that have some other ideas of where they might make some budget cuts as well. So when we do that, we'll have a better answer for you.
Well, and the other thing that I find kind of curious is that our police has almost $1 million under budget expense. And I think in one of your earlier slides, we talked about the civil unrest, how that's going to impact us. Even with the civil unrest, and I presume that's a lot of overtime we're paying for our officers. We're still showing almost $1 million under budget.
A lot of that's due to the vacancies that they have, though.
Right.
But I think you'll see in June that overtime kick in for the month of June. This is only through the end of May, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
So
That's right.
June will show a different picture.
Councilmember Gregory, did you have a question? You're on mute. Still on mute.
Councilmember Gregory, there you go.
There
Okay.
you go. There you are.
Are we, I have two questions. One is, the police department is under about 57 officers. Is that around where they are?
I'm not sure, Councilmember Gregory, where they are at this point.
Approximately.
Okay. The next question is, are we anticipating a potential shutdown or stay-at-home order, perhaps from the governor? And do we have any projections to accommodate such?
From the governor, I'm not expecting one at this time.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure we're prepared, because as we become more and more of a hotspot, it looks like something may have to change.
Something may have to break, you know.
Yes.
I agree. If I was showing a chart of our local numbers earlier today, and Charleston County is going off the chart.
Yes, yes, yes.
It's
Just
really-
checking, just to make sure that, just in case, that we're
Right.
budgeting accordingly.
You see my response, right?
Yes, I see it.
No one's in the room, so I can.
Okay, all right.
So, Councilmember Waring is with us now. I see him on the call. Yeah. So I don't know that this would make a lot of dollars difference, but Amy, are COVID-19 expenses included in these actual numbers? And we do have approval now to get reimbursements on those expenses from the state, but it's not a whole lot of money.
No, and those are in a separate, a non-departmental, so they're not included in those numbers there. So these are all just the department numbers.
I see. Okay, terrific. Okay, any other questions on the expenditures? Okay, great.
Okay, stormwater, right now, we're tracking over our targeted revenue by $112,000. We're noticing a little bit of a dip in the collections. It could be due to timing, but we're also watching this to see if it could be an impact from delinquent accounts as well. And total expenditures are tracking under targeted expenditures by $563,000.
That's good.
So just moving on to our revenue loss projections. So these are all updated as of the end of May. So you'll see we're still pretty much tracking where we were before. It's a little bit better based on some collections that we've higher than we expected for hospitality and probably in business licenses, really. But we previously projected a $41.1 million loss. We're at about $37 million right now. Like I said, we received a little bit more in hospitality funds than we projected, but we believe most of that's from the deferred taxes from February through May. That's why we saw kind of a big jump in that number. Municipal accommodations is suffering. So they were still for March slightly less than we projected. And we just received April's collections, which was only $63,000. The original amount we budgeted for April was almost $476,000. So you can see how much less revenue we're receiving. Parking is doing a little bit better than we projected too, but that's mostly due to the transient parking in the garages and the lots. Do you have any questions? And then we'll just talk about the tourism funds. Right now, those are our projected losses. So even with the current available fund balances, we're still at $15.3 million, almost 4 million. I mean, 400,000. So with state accommodations tax, we talked about this before, we won't see another check from them for a while because we receive them quarterly. And with the deferral in those taxes, we probably won't see anything until September or October, really. So, but we did get some information. So for April in 2020, we received almost $80,525. Last year, April, we received $860,000. So that's how much of a reduction in our revenues we're seeing. We've paid $1.2 million, or we've received $1.2 million. I'm sorry, my slide is hidden because all I see is your faces. So hold on one second. But we paid $979,000 out of that right now for subrecipients, the DASH shuttle and the CVB. Right now, the general fund has covered $3 million for debt payments and for the renovation of the visitor center. And we did talk about us sending letters to all the grant recipients just to let them know not to expect payment and that we would reevaluate in the third quarter. So those letters all went out. And we did also advise them that we do not plan to grant any funds for 2021. We haven't received any feedback yet, so nobody's yelled and screamed at us just yet. I know the county is doing the same exact thing with their accommodations tax, so we're all in the same boat, that's for sure. Municipal accommodations, we're still projecting a $5 million loss, and this is just a graph that kind of shows you where we were. The red line is 2019, and the blue line is 2020. You see how much we're tracking below 2019 normal numbers. So this year, at this time last year, we collected 2.5. Right now, we've only collected $1 million. And that's just putting an additional strain on the general fund, because we had 3.45 million budgeted for operating expenses into the general fund. And so now with the increasing number of COVID cases, we're not expecting our tourism industry to recover anytime soon. So we feel like our projections are realistic at this point. Hospitality, we're still a $9.1 million loss projection. Collections are down a cumulative 40% at this point. As we discussed before, 5.35 million was budgeted to transfer into the general fund for operating expenses. So that puts an additional strain on the general fund. Last year at this time, we collected 7.48 million. Right now, we've only collected 4.5. And then obviously with the COVID cases, we're just not planning. We don't think that things will recover as we were hoping they would. And we've seen too that many restaurants have had to close again. So we're just pretty confident with our projection at this point. Any questions on tourism funds? No. Okay, we'll move on to enterprise funds.
Well, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Jim? Yeah, you know what, obviously the gross reductions in A-tax and H-tax revenue, are there, we have to have some sort of strategy, I guess, in 21, you know, to
Yes.
come back, okay? So they, you know, there's certain, I guess, people we give grants to that truly put heads in beds and, you know, put people in restaurants and bars, obviously, which helps the economy come back. I understand. I'm going into 21 now, maybe even in the second half of 21. We have some monies that's in abeyance for other projects, and believe me, all those projects are important. Does it make sense for us to begin to look at a strategy in 21 that if we were to go to some of the funds that were A-tax and H-tax funds that were put aside for capital projects to help our local economy come back, in particular with those proven entities that put heads in beds? And one of the ones I'll bring up as an example is Wildlife Expo. I mean, they put people in heads in beds. So anyway, I'm just wondering, are we even looking at that? Will we look at that?
Yes, we will. So what we said with the, and that's state accommodations tax, Councilmember Waring, that we give those funds away for.
Okay,
So
all right.
we said that at this time, we weren't planning to do any grant opportunities at all, but we would look at it while we were budgeting for 2021 to see where we were, that if we were able to grant some funding to organizations, and it would be those organizations that would give us the biggest impact on tourism, that we would do that. So it's just kind of a, let's look and see what we can do while we're budgeting for 2021.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so enterprise funds. Not a whole lot of change here. Parking, our projected loss for parking went down just a little bit, just because we are seeing a little bit better numbers with that. But we'll talk about that a little bit later. So all of our facilities are open with the exception of the ballpark and the golf course. Through May right now, we're about $900,000 under budget for the enterprise funds. But we have seen visitation steadily increasing every week since we opened on May 28th. But then, you know, we have the concern of the coronavirus too. For parking, we're approximately 2.8 million under budget. 28% loss in revenues for all things related to on-street parking, and 19% loss in revenue for parking garages through May. We had talked about, there was about $75,000 in unpaid monthly parking fees. ABM has collected the majority of those. We only have about $6,600 left outstanding. And parking fund could actually potentially break even, but it would not be able to supply that surplus, or they won't have a surplus to transfer to the general fund as we had budgeted for. If you remember, we budgeted a little over $11 million to transfer to the general fund to balance our budget, our 2020 budget, and it won't be able to do that. The one thing that's an outlier is the college. If they don't start school back in the fall, we won't receive the parking for that semester, and it will affect revenues by $230,000. Any questions on enterprise? General fund. Right now, business licenses looks okay. We're still projecting just a little bit of a loss, just because we're only through May, really. So just to be conservative. Inspection and fees are down. We are seeing, May it was down. We're seeing a little bit of an uptick again in that, but it's still just uncertain. Police fines are way down. Tourism obviously is way down, and our recreational facilities are down. Not just the facilities, it's programs, it's everything. So like I said, business licenses looks pretty good. I'm not really too concerned about business licenses. Like I said, inspection and fees, they're slightly above target to date. We saw a little bit of a decrease in May, but we'll just continue to monitor that. And then police fines, tourism, recreation all continue to be well under budget.
I would just add, Amy, that I would think the biggest impact for business license fees will be in next year's budget rather than this year's, because I think everybody knows, the fee is based on last year's gross revenues, and there was no impact, of course, in 2019's gross revenues for our businesses, but there will be a serious impact in 2020 for next year's license fee. Yeah.
Right. We'll see we'll have to carefully budget for business licenses the next year. So some of the savings we talked about last month was that we had identified was the hiring freeze, which was potentially $6 million. The retirement system actually suspended their contribution increase. So that's about $450,000 in fuel savings. But all of that is through the end of the year. So those are just projections at this point. It's not set in stone that we'll actually save that. It just depends on gas prices for fuel anyway. So these savings could cover the projected loss in revenues for the general fund, but it won't cover all of the budgeted transfer from parking and tourism. Like we've talked about, we'll see additional unbudgeted expenses in June that will impact any savings that we've already identified. And I've mentioned the budget analysts have gone through all departmental budgets with additional recommendations that they'll talk to the department heads about. And I know that a couple of other department heads have called me with some other ideas as well. So we're all working very well together on this. We have asked all departments to postpone any large expenditures, projects, or initiatives, at least through September, so we can get a better handle on where we are. So just to kind of give you an idea of where all of our money goes, our biggest expenditure is obviously in personnel. So when we're looking at budget cuts, it's really hard not to consider personnel in that in order to have any meaningful type of cut. So we might need to make some hard decisions on that. So cash flow is our other big issue. Cash is king and every dollar matters. So right now we're projecting that cash will get tight in September. We're bringing an ordinance to you the first meeting in July to start the process of getting a tax anticipation note to get us through the end of the year. Where the ordinance will say up to 40 million. The way that I look at it and the cash flow projections that we have would be about $34–35 million that we would need through the end of the year. So I'm just giving us a little bit of a cushion there. Again, I've asked departments to slow their spending, and like I said, every dollar matters at this point, because anything that we cut might save a little bit of money that we would have to borrow. So it's really, really important right now.
Amy,
Yes.
go back a couple of slides when you show that right here. So if we automate personnel cuts, what kind of number are you talking about?
Well, can we go further a little bit? Because I have some things that we've been researching.
All right, that's fine.
Okay. Any questions on what I said so far? So right now, some short-term strategies that we could use to slow the flow of cash. Hiring freeze, which we've already implemented through September. We're really going to need to extend that through the end of the year and probably into 2021. Currently, it doesn't include sworn positions, but we might have to rethink that in a thoughtful way. Like I said, we've estimated that could potentially save us around $6 million, just this hiring freeze. Another thing we could do is allow voluntary part-time status to our employees. It would allow them to reduce their hours, which might be something that they would welcome right now, or some people, it's voluntary, so they might want to do that with childcare issues they're having with the coronavirus. And we could just establish a sunset date and specify that any emergency recall full-time may be necessary, depending on if we get a hurricane or something like that. So that's another option we could utilize. Voluntary time off for employees. We could allow employees to take unpaid leave. This is kind of a precursor to a mandatory time off program. The next thing Councilmember Shade is really what we're talking about is a mandatory time off for employees, which is unpaid, which you could also say is a furlough. And the number of days would be determined based on the savings desired. We'd have to ensure scheduling time off doesn't critically impact services. And it would have to apply to all city employees, including sworn, in order for it to be effective.
I volunteer for mandatory time off.
Second.
The other thing with this too is we would need to, I would want to, if we were to do this, allow people to take it over a period of time, so you don't have them have to take one whole week at a time, because that would seriously impact some of our employees where they really can't handle not having a week's paycheck. So if they could take a day here and there, as long as it was scheduled out and we were actually getting the savings that we needed, I'd rather do it that way. So we did do some calculations. If we were to do a 20-hour furlough, that would be about $875,000. A 40-hour furlough would be 1.7 million, and an 80-hour furlough would be $3.4 million. But 80 hours in a
Amy,
yes.
when we furloughed in 2000, what was it, 9, 10, and 11, or 10 and 11, what was that? Do you remember?
So what we did, we didn't do a furlough. What we did was we reduced everybody's pay.
3, 4, and 5%, right? Depending on what pay grade you're at.
That's right.
Okay.
And so I don't want to do that, because what happened is you never catch back up. And so if you remember last year, we did that nice pay plan change, which kind of helped everybody, because we never ever caught their salaries back up. And I think over time, it just hurts our employees even more. So I would prefer not to just reduce people's salary. if that makes sense.
So you just give them time off,
Yes,
unpaid, so they get extra vacation days, but they're unpaid.
that's right. Because we'll never catch back up again. We'll be in the same situation that we just corrected.
Thanks.
Another thing is make acceptable reductions in service levels for non-essential services. You might need to consider eliminating some services that are nice to have, but not essential. Look at services that might overlap with other governments or nonprofits and eliminate those. We could reduce hours at recreation facilities. But remember, any decisions that we make there would affect employees' hours or jobs. And of course, all of these will affect employee morale as well. And then that's really all I had for that. Do you have any questions on any of these?
Well,
Yes.
yeah, if you go back to my initial question on that other slide that you were on with the right here, 94 million
Mhm.
on personnel. So we know that we have not hired any new positions, and we were addressing a hiring freeze, accepting firemen and police officers. But you would recommend that we reevaluate that as well.
We may need to, but it would need to be in a very, very thoughtful way. But what I'm saying is if we furlough, it has to include police and fire, because otherwise it's not meaningful enough. They're the biggest salary we have.
Yeah, I was getting, and you reading my mind is what I'm thinking about. I mean, the good chunk of our salaried employees are sworn officers.
That's right.
So is there a not a magic number, but a sweet spot number that you're looking at to reduce this $94 million?
No, I just gave you the numbers that, I mean, we're talking about half a year. To do an 80-hour furlough to our employees would hurt them pretty significantly, because that's trying to take 2 weeks of unpaid leave within a 6-month period. And I think for some of our employees that would be a lot. So
In other words, what I was thinking about, and if this makes any sense, if a employee took off 1 day every other week across the board, would that have a significant impact?
well, as long as it was all within this year. I mean, we could project out how, when the last day that they could actually take that leave would be, so we would know. I mean, everybody would have to kind of schedule it out and let us know where it is, so we would know. I mean, regardless, we'll have to get a tan no matter what, but it will help us. It will help us limp along a little bit, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Councilmember Berry.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Amy, obviously, I think that the tax anticipation note is a good idea. If we did that in the amount of roughly 40 million, and instead of gaming this out or cash flowing this out over 6 months, what would it look like if we projected this for 12 months, maybe even 15 months? What would be the revenue stream? That's a tough question. I mean, you might need to get back to me on this, but what would be the revenue stream we would need to do to keep our staff in place? In other words, it's one thing to have the business community shut down, but we start laying off people in a big way. You have the city shut down, and then bang, we in hurricane season, and bad luck on that. And we got some talented people at home without pay. I don't think that works well for the city. So if we had this 40 million, from a personnel standpoint, how long would it enable us to keep our people in place?
Well, it would help us for sure, but you got to remember that we got to pay that TAN back.
I understand.
So even in 21, we'll have to have significant budget cuts in order, because we're going to have to pay the TAN back. So it's not really helping our revenue loss at all. It's just helping us get through the end of the year until we get those taxes.
I agree. I agree. It's bridging us, and that's the more time we have, obviously, hopefully somebody's going to come up with a better treatment protocol, and maybe even a vaccine. So that's why I want to look at 12, maybe even 15 months. I mean, if it's a miracle and somebody has a vaccine prior to year end, believe me, I'll be the first one with pom-poms cheering them on. But just in case, if we were to, in particular, game out to this time next year, what type cash flows we would need, and plus, what would be the payment on that TAN, and do we have any bonds that are getting close to maturity that hopefully, um, you know, either we can refinance to pick up cash flow to help pay the TAN, that kind of thing.
I don't think we have any bonds that are due within the next couple of years. We always look at bonds that we could refinance, and so
Right.
we're looking at that right now as well.
I thought we had one coming up like September or so, 21, but
Maybe we do.
But anyway, I mean, we can look at that. But I'm just trying to figure out a way to, with interest rates being as low as they are, that's our friend in this situation. And if we can find a way to help pay the TAN, the payment on the TAN, by picking up through refinancing, that would be a pretty good move.
Yeah, we have to pay that TAN back within 1 year in full.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're short term. They're not an extended length of time. You have to pay those back very quickly.
Yeah, I know they're short term, but
So, and we don't want to continually have to borrow money to make payroll. So
No.
that's why 2021 is going to be a hard budget as well.
I get that, but when we look at our personnel, I mean, when you look before the Great Recession, back in 08, 09, I think the city had close to 1,900 employees. I don't know whether we ever got back up to that. So we run a pretty thin, we're pretty lean to begin with. Where would be some of the areas, and this puts you in a bad spot, but what would be some of the areas that you say, well, these would be some of the areas we can trim? Obviously, it won't be first responders, but what would be some of the areas that you would?
Well, see, that's the thing. Like, if you did that, you'd have to do everybody, because otherwise it doesn't do anything. You know what I mean? If we just picked and choose certain people that might not be super busy right now, I mean, that's not going to, it will help a little. Like you said, every dollar matters, but really you would have to do something more impactful. I mean, this is the last thing that I want to do. This is why I've talked to department heads and said, find whatever you can to cut. But, with a $40 million revenue loss, that's pretty big. I don't know how I mean, we just can't cut that much. So, you know that, Councilmember Waring, you do this with us every year, so you know how lean we run anyway. So it's not an easy task at all.
It's a tough situation, and
it is that.
I honestly, I'm always an optimist, and I'd hope that the CARES Act would come through with some lost revenue coverage by the federal government. That hadn't happened. It seems like every day, week that goes by, that doesn't happen. It seems less likely to me. So if we're going to consider any unpaid vacation, it seems to me that we'd want to try to decide to give people enough time to, like, if I were taking a week's vacation, which I'm not, but if I were, to go ahead and take that extra day or two with it, even though it be unpaid, just from a planning point of view. If I were going to, nobody's traveling, but if you were going on a trip, I'm just thinking out loud, that we ought to try to figure out in the next month or two whether we're going to recommend that. Otherwise, we'll be, bumping up to the end of the year, and people won't have time to space out their time off. Councilmember Jackson, you're on mute.
I'm curious in brainstorming with y'all. Amy, have you had any, just off the record sort of conversations with some department heads who think this could be a palatable game plan? Or is it really going to hurt, the overall employee morale, as you called it?
There's not a single one of us that want to do this. I can tell you that right now. It will. I mean, like you said, we run lean as it is anyway, and no one wants to. It will impact morale for sure. But it just might be a necessary evil for us to do, unfortunately.
I mean, for example, warming up the citizenry that maybe we're going to have to decrease collections, or, they're going to have to be part of the solution if this really is something that we can't get through without seeing a sustained decrease in revenue that needs to be combined with changes in expenditures. So I don't know what you've been brainstorming about that, but it seems like it's all for one and one for all in terms of helping our voters understand that we can't continue to operate at a level of service standards excellence when we're suffering with being able to pay our employees.
That's all part of the conversations we'll have with the department heads as well. I've had some with a couple already.
Councilmember Shade.
So when do we have to start making that decision? When do we need to start implementing whatever plan we have with personnel for this year to make this worthwhile?
Probably within the next month at least. We're like I said, we're working with department heads to see, but in all honesty, even the cuts that we would make in budget, like you can see this chart right here. It's all, our operating budget it's big, but it's tight. You know that too, Councilmember Shade. I mean, pretty much everything we budget is for things that we need. So we really would have to cut, things that we're doing. We'd have to maybe not cut grass as much, those types of things that we would have to do, make those big decisions as well. So it needs to be everybody in this working together to get through it and figure out how we can cut as many expenses as we can. And right now, most of the larger things that people are doing, they're holding off on. So that will help too.
So, and the other part of that, Amy, if we implement some kind of program that reduces our expenditures on personnel, does that also impact on our expenditures on fringe benefits?
Yeah, it would. If we're doing say that again?
So whatever decisions we make on expenditures dealing with personnel, if it's a furlough, a hiring freeze, or even an outright layoff, that's going to have an impact on fringe benefits too.
That's right, because you won't pay them, you won't be paying the benefits either.
Right. So, which is the second largest part of this pie is.
Third largest.
That's right.
Yeah. It's
retirement, all of that.
That is the third largest, but still is a huge chunk. When you look at personnel, on our outlay for salaries and things of that nature, but the fringe benefits is also a huge part of that. So, listen, I'm not trying to sound cold, but I'm trying to advocate that. It's just a reality when you look at numbers and you pointed out personnel, you also are including the fringe benefit expenditure component as well.
Right. So those numbers, okay, so with and this would just be general fund, 20 hours, including retirement and FICA, all of that would be $1 million. 40 hours would be 2.1 and 80 hours would be $4.3 million, including fringes.
And that's just for one employee?
No, that's citywide.
That's for everybody.
That's for everybody. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
All right.
Happy 4th of July.
That's what I'm always here for, is all the good news.
Happy 4th of July, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so 2021 budget.
Okay, so we already talked about a lot of this. Many assumptions we'll have to make for 21. Will we be operating normal? Will revenues return to normal? significant cuts due to the TAN. We kind of already talked about all of that. Departments' budgets are due on July 10th. Healthcare and workers' compensations budgets are always done in August. We have the HR committee and those move forward. We'll go through all the departmental requests with all of you at the August meeting, and then the meetings with the department heads will be in September. And then we have to have the budget complete and to full council by November 17th, just to keep dates in mind. And then we have a full council workshop next Thursday as well for everyone. And I'll basically have this same information, and anything else you think that I should have for that meeting, just let me know.
Okie dokie.
And if you have any questions.
Any further questions? Councilmember Waring.
So Amy, I guess just going back, if we go back to that pie chart, I know you're in 21, but if you go back to the pie chart that Peter, yep, right there. So basically, if we had I don't know, 10% across the board cutting and personnel, we basically gonna say roughly 9 and about 13, 14 million.
Yeah.
In other words, we had a furlough, not cutting and
Yeah,
salary.
that's why I got confused. I'm sorry. So if we did 20 hours off, including fringe benefits, just salaries, it would be $875,000. With fringes, it's $1 million in savings. If it's 40 hours, it's 1.7 million just salaries, or it's 2.1 million with fringes. And then 80 hours would be almost 3.5 million. And with fringes, it would be 4.3 million.
Yeah, it's tough.
It is tough.
Okay.
Councilmember Appel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to kind of bring up two quick things just to kind of talk about here. One of the things I've heard from property owners, especially some of the folks on Upper King Street and elsewhere in the city, is what's going to happen when property tax bills come in. You know, for a lot of these businesses that have been kind of just limping along, you know, some folks are going to be getting $80,000, $100,000 property tax bills. Has there been any kind of thought or discussion about what our largest revenue source is going to look like next year? I know normally this is some of the most, you know, inelastic or rock solid revenue source, you know, around, but under these circumstances, it may not be the case. So that's issue one. And then issue number two, and this is just maybe for everybody to think about, you know, these are strange times and there may be the need for some real creative out of the box thinking. You know, I work with a lot of developers that work in jurisdictions all over the state, and there is, especially for large development, there is an opportunity for, under the right framework, developers to pay significant sums of money to the city for various types of concessions that can run the range from expedited permit review, waivers from certain parking requirements, additional, height, density. I mean, you know, we can structure some kind of very creative, reasonable, appropriate framework that could potentially be a revenue source for the city moving forward. And I know that's a major can of worms that raises very appropriate concerns, objections. You know, I can see where this could go in the wrong direction, but this happens around the country. It's not completely unprecedented, and it may be a conversation worth having under these very extreme circumstances.
So we that is another option, is obviously revenue looking at revenue increases and tax increases and all of that. One thing, Councilmember Appel, we did raise some of our fees within the last 2 years, and we do have a expedited review process or re-review, I think, where we're charging more for that. But the state limits us. We can't make money off of our fees that we charge. So we always have to make sure that we're calculating how much it costs, like per review, staff time, all of that, to make sure that the whatever we're charging is not more than what we have operating expenses for. So the state limits us a lot in our revenue capacity, just to let you know that.
On the property taxes, I confirmed this is a reassessment year for Charleston County. And normally when reassessments occur, it works out to be a benefit to the overall assessed value to the city. So I hear you that some folks will, particularly on commercial properties, I would think, may be able to contest even their present assessed value of their properties and claim that their value has come down a little bit. But overall, a reassessment should level the playing field for us. I'm hopeful, at least.
So we haven't done any real projections on next year for property taxes until we get those reassessment values from the county. So it's just a fun year. I mean, there's so many fun things going on that's just limiting our capacity to do anything right now. So once we get those, we'll look at that.
All right, on all this happy news, any other questions or comments?
Sorry to ruin your weekend.
Oh, no, it's real. It's what we have to deal with, folks, and we will. I thank Amy and her crew for amazing amount of work that goes into all this, particularly under the circumstances. And, you know, we'll continue to assess the savings that we are will realize from all the departments all chipping in. And I mean, you saw that one slide where we were under budget by $8 million plus in expenses. That takes a real effort on everybody's part. And Amy's absolutely right. Our number one priority is preservation of our workforce and keeping this great team together. In addition to that, I mean, she continues by asking that projects be put off, that some of our budget for this year was actually for capital expenditures. And so to the extent we push something like that over to next year, there will be a delay in the project, of course, but if that means that money basically comes to the bottom line as a savings for this year's budget, that helps to preserve our workforce. And I'm going to be the eternal optimist, and even though I don't feel as good about it, we still could get some lost income from the CARES Act before the end of the year. We do get reimbursements for these direct expenditures, again, for COVID-19. Again, it's not a huge sum of money, but every $1 million or $2 million helps, right? So we're going to continue. I know Amy and them are working hard on it to pull $1 million here, $1 million there, save $1 million here, and do our best to protect the workforce and our employees' salaries and work on that. Continue to work on that. All right. Anything else for the good of the order? Amy, any final thoughts for us?
So Amy, just one follow-up question. If we've got to make some of these hard choices, then we need to be meeting again pretty soon. Because you said to vote the worthwhile, we don't need to make these decisions in time for August.
Right. So we'll try to have some more information for you all next week for the full council meeting.
All
and
right.
then if we want to have another special meeting, ad hoc meeting, I can schedule that as well. If you want to have that.
Probably need to do that.
Okay.
Hey, Amy, I mean, Congress will go out for their August recess, and it looks like whatever they do with the new care stimulus thing will be done this month in July. We want to get it done before they go out. So we'll have some idea, I think, by the end of July or mid to late July, what help, if any, we'll be getting from Congress.
Well, that's good. Hopefully they get that done. Councilmember Waring?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. One of the things that was just mentioned, about reassessment, I agree with you in that, Mr. Mayor. But if I were on county council and we had the ability to kick that down the road 12 more months, I probably would vote to do that. So we might want to have that in the back of our mind that reassessment may be delayed by a year or so, just to help out property owners all over the county. But anyway,
I checked with the auditor a week or so ago, and as of right now, they're still planning on doing it this year.
Okay.
That could change any day. I understand.
Right.
Can I just add one other thing that I forgot to mention? Because we just finished our audit and sent that off to the GFOA. So, we always have that 20% general fund reserve for unassigned for, to keep our, keep it that way for our bond ratings and things like that. So this year we did have some additional reserves of $10.5 million. So I put 7 million of that into unassigned. So right now our unassigned fund balance is at 23%, just knowing that we would need a little bit of a cushion. So we're a little bit higher. So when we do come toward court, when the auditors come to you and hopefully end of July or August to report that out, that's what they'll report, is that we actually have more than our 20%.
So y'all, that's really good news. And
I can end on a good note for change.
we are ending on a good note. To be adding to our reserve by 3% above the 20 is great news. And that gives us in effect part of the reserve that we may need to make up that revenue shortfall, part of it.
And Amy, does the 20% become less because our revenue shortfall? What we budgeted for the 20% might be
it's based on what we budgeted for 2020. So it didn't reduce it. Now 2021, it probably will. Because we'll have our budget will be less.
So that's good news. We'll end on a good note here, y'all. Y'all have a great weekend, long weekend. Let's all rest up a little bit. Happy 4th of July. But wear your mask.
Okay, Mayor.
Yes, sir, Mayor.
All right. Have a great
Thank you.
folks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Thank you, Amy.